review. And today I'm joined by Chris. Thanks for coming on the show, Chris.
Thank you for having me, Mike. I'm excited to talk about what we're going to be talking about.
I think it actually just went live right now. Okay, so all right.
Google
Hi,
Hangouts.
everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, Hangouts. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This is the second episode of From a Certain Point of View, and today I'm joined by Chris, and we will be reviewing the first issue of Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir. So thanks for joining today, Chris.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I'm very excited to talk about this.
Yeah, I heard you say yesterday on Facebook that this is like one of the first times that you bought a comic book on the day of release, and it's the same thing for me too. I was because once the Clone Wars was canceled or went off the air, or whatever, um, it was just a real shame because they kind of just left that Darth Maul plot like hanging. It's like Sidious is Force Lightnings him, and he's like, I have other uses for you. It's like, what? It's like, what's going on? That's like a pretty crazy. But now we get some type of resolution with this comic book, and it's really great that we're getting it in some type of form. But so yeah, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I like you said, I was extremely excited to get this comic for a lot of reasons. I'm a huge fan of the Clone Wars show. While the Clone Wars was on, I got so much more into Star Wars fandom. A lot of the stuff that I've made and I've done, all the websites, Facebook groups, pages, they all kind of started with the Clone Wars. So obviously we were all extremely, saddened to hear that the show would be ending a little bit earlier than the writers had anticipated. I mean, they were writing, I think, season 9, and they only got to show, 5.5 seasons. So I was very saddened that they were moving on to another time period so soon. But it was great that Lucasfilm decided to give Dark Horse some of the scripts to adapt into comics. And so I support this comic not just as a story, and we're going to get into talking about how it's great as a story, but just the whole idea, the concept of taking some of those scripts from the Clone Wars, from the future seasons, and adapting them into comics or novels or any other stories that they want. That's just a really cool idea, and I'm supporting this because I not only want to see how Darth Maul's story progresses and Mother Talzin and all the other characters that are covered in this story, but I want to see what happens to Ahsoka. I want to see what happens to Cad Bane. I want to see Boba Fett mature and grow up. There's all this stuff that I want to see, and I really hope that the feedback that this first kind of experiment is getting is good, so that they decide to give Dark Horse or other Del Rey maybe some scripts to write stories out of. So I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's great that we're getting it in some sort of fashion, you know. As far as the cover is concerned, it's a really cool cover, and it's got that little tagline, "You can't keep a bad Sith down," which is really cool because, as we know, Darth Maul was kind of in a state of like self-loathing and pity for a while, but then Savage and Mother Talzin kind of resurrected him and made him the menacing force that he used to be. So yeah, basically it just opens up. Well, one thing I want to say is that I wish that but this happens a lot of times with any source of media, whether it be a book or a movie or anything. I wish that we kind of knew what happened, like right after, like the second after, Maul got Force Lightning by Sidious, and it's like, don't worry, I'm not going to kill you, I have other uses for you. Like, I know it sounds kind of weird and morbid, but I really like Savage. Like, I kind of wonder what happened to him.
Yeah.
Like, what did the Mandalorians do when they saw his body? And something that happened in this issue, I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but it has to do with what I'm talking about. The Dark was retrieved by Darth Maul's super commandos. So it's like,
Right.
you think that Sidious might have wanted to take that as like a souvenir, but I guess not. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that was kind of interesting. I wasn't expecting that to kind of show up at that point when they recovered the dark saber and gave it back to Maul. I guess it's just because, like, from a writing point of view, I mean, why just let it sit after Pre Vizsla dies? You know, why? Why? I mean, it's a really cool object, and it's really cool to see Maul fight with it. So I kind of get that. I mean, unless they were to hand it off to Sidious and then have Sidious fight with it, there's really it's really pointless just to leave it somewhere. So having it still being involved in the story and kind of almost being a character of its own is cool. I mean, I think it would be great if we saw like a comic book or a video game or something cover the history of the Darksaber and that story that Pre Vizsla told about how it was recovered by the ancient Mandalorians when they raided the temple. That would be really cool. So I kind of like how this is like a thread that's going through multiple eras in Star Wars with this Darksaber thing, and I think it's a great decision to kind of keep it involved in the story. So I was pleasantly surprised to see it show up again.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, um, that's a great point. You said like it's kind of it's kind of like a character in its own right, and it's it has like such a rich history behind it. I guess Sidious, he's known for like well Palpatine and Sidious, kind of like lifestyle. He's like he's the Supreme Chancellor. So uh, I guess maybe he considered the dark saber like obsolete, like just he just didn't like it. He considered probably like crude, maybe. Because it's just like an old, an old like it's kind of like an artifact compared to all the other,
Yeah.
sabers. Um, but yeah. So what did you think about them kind of changing the? Let me find like a good picture of cast and stuff. What did you think about them kind of changing like the appearance? I don't know. Could you see that? Like
Yeah.
changing the appearance of like the Mandalorian armor.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, it's interesting. You can tell that the style that Dark Horse and let's see, who's the inker is Mauro Vargas and colors by Wes Joba, um, and pencils by Juan Ferreira. So I think they did a great job coming up with kind of a different style that's not. It doesn't necessarily look like the Clone Wars animation style. Like the Clone Wars animation style is so stylized. Everything looks. I think it's based off of like the Thunderbirds. So everything's like really pointy and wooden. And this is a lot more organic looking. Looks a lot more like the Republic comics, which and other comics that took place around in the Clone Wars era that came out before the Clone Wars TV series. So I think it's interesting just seeing the Clone Wars characters with this different type of animation that we haven't seen. I think that's really cool. Also kind of reminds me a little bit of those short comics that they had on StarWars.com that were like between episodes. There was like a comic miniseries, and like I think there Commander Gantz, there were like some unique characters to that. It reminds me of that a little bit too. So I think it's pretty cool. And as far as the look of the Mandos themselves go, I mean, it's pretty awesome. They clearly have modeled their armor after Maul's. I think they look a lot more menacing than they did in the TV show. In the TV show, the Mandos were very they have very thin frames. They weren't that muscular, which kind of fit with the style of all the other characters in the show. And I think it's kind of interesting to see more of like a superhero like He-Man like kind of like a 1990s Kenner action figure style characters. So I like what they did with that, and with Maul too himself, his looking so muscular, and I mean his arms are like huge. He looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, I kind of think like they almost have like a Halo, like
Mm.
like a Spartan armor kind of feel
Yes.
to them a little bit.
Yes.
Um, Definitely cool. And like you said, the clones, like all the characters, just the art design, artistic license, they were just had very skinny, frail looking characters. Um, But yeah, so another thing that's pretty interesting, um, getting back to like the plot, is that we find out that Maul was a basically kind of like a gift. Okay, Sidious says Maul came to me as a child, a not so appreciated gift from Mother Talzin. Her spite for me runs deep. So there's kind of a history between Sidious and Talzin, which we had no idea about. We knew that Dooku and Talzin had a history because she's like, I'm just. She basically said, "I hope our paths never cross again." I'm doing you this favor because a long time ago you helped me. So we knew that Dooku and Talzin had a history, but now we know that Talzin and Sidious have a history. So I'm sure in future issues that's going to be expanded upon, and we'll
Yeah,
learn more about that.
and what's
And
really
then,
interesting about that, just jumping in, is I don't know how many people watching this podcast have read the Darth Plagueis novel that came out. I think it was 2 years ago now. Yeah, it was in 2012 when it came out. And again, we don't really know if that's canon still because Lucasfilm was kind of taken a lot of the novels and comics and video games and pushed them off and said that we're going to kind of start again, and they're in this Legends category. So even though that's like a very recently released novel and it was a tie-in to like episode 1 when that was coming out in 3D and had some tie-ins to the Clone Wars, I don't know if they're going to be retelling that story and it's still going to count anymore. But anyway, for those of you, it's not really much of a spoiler, who haven't read it, there is a scene in that novel where Darth Sidious goes to Dathomir and meets with a Night Sister to acquire Maul when he was a child. And so I think this is obviously what the comic is referring to. The thing that's interesting is I'm not exactly 100% sure of this, but because it's been 2 years since I've read the novel, but I believe Maul was supposed to be an infant in the novel, whereas the photo in the comic looks more like maybe 6 years old. He looks like preschool age, maybe a little
yeah,
older.
5 or 6.
Yeah. So I feel like maybe they're saying they're kind of taking the idea from that novel and then just kind of twisting a little bit to fit their own artistic vision and storytelling for this. Now, of course, we know that this comic is canon. Lucasfilm has said that this is not in the same category as all of the other comic books that have been released by Dark Horse and Marvel. That this is officially the next story and line for the Clone Wars series, which is canon. So yeah, I think this isn't the first time that they've insinuated that there's something going on between Talzin, or at least the Night Sisters in general, and Sidious. And I'm interested to see if they're going to expand on that any and how it's going to play into the story. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's cool. I'm not that well versed in the EU, so I didn't know that there was any type of connection between Sidious and Talzin already. But yeah, so that's cool. And another thing I want to say is that we find out that, well, of course, Almec kind of orchestrated this whole thing, and then he basically said to Maul, like, you got me out, so now I got you out. And he said that the Pikes and the Black Sun still remain loyal, but as we learned from Dooku, that the Hutts are no longer, they're not associated with Maul and his Shadow Collective anymore. I kind of wish that we saw the Pikes and the Black Sun, especially the Pikes, because I really liked that character design. I thought it was pretty cool. And when we got to see them in the Lost missions, I was really happy about that because I just like the character design. It's it's weird and it's eccentric and I like the the really unique looking aliens that come out of Star Wars. Hopefully we might see them in issue 2 perhaps. That'd be really cool. And something that I wanted to point out is that when Dooku and Grievous are talking, Grievous basically, Dooku puts Grievous in his place because Grievous said, you should have killed Maul when you had him in your hands, when you had him in your custody. I told you he was too dangerous, to let live. And then Dooku's like, do not question my plans. No, do not question the plans of my master. So some tension there between Grievous and Dooku. But anyway, the important line is um, Grievous says he will. No, sorry. Dooku says he will do what any child would. He will cry for help. Now, I was talking to Chris about this right before we started to hang out. I think that word child, Dooku's known for his condescending nature. Um, you, you know, Yoda holds you at such high esteem. Surely you can do better. He does a lot of trash talking. But I think that the word child was, specifically used. It's of some significance. I think that Maul might be related to Talzin in some way, shape, or form. I think that's why it was used, because they're trying to get Talzin out of hiding, basically. Like Sidious said, they're trying to coax her into the light. So yeah, I think little things like that. Writers they throw out little insinuations like that. So what do you think about that, Chris?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, I'm not so sure about the genealogy. I think it's very possible that Maul is physically, has been spawned from Talzin. I think that's definitely a possibility. I think that's a possibility with all of the Knight brothers. But just in general, I mean, the title of this comic is Darth Maul, son of Dathomir. And Mother Talzin is she's like the spiritual mother, the leader of Dathomir. So it makes sense that she would be considered his mother in like a symbolic sense. So I mean, it makes sense that they're referring to that. And if there's any other life like blood connections between them, I mean, it's very possible. I mean, I think that now remember, Maul has magic kind of in him, because he's not that monster that went to Dathomir. He's a little bit more full and whole in himself, kind of like how Savage was repaired. So if anything, on top of just being originally from Dathomir and possibly being spawned from Talzin, he also is kind of like her magical offspring, because he has this thing. And it's also said in one of the lines, paraphrasing, that if Maul is still alive, then Talzin must still be alive. So I think just how Savage and Maul are kind of basically they're like on so many levels the child of Mother Talzin. They're just being sons of Dathomir, and her being the mother of Dathomir. Then possibly because of actual genetics, possibly we don't know who their parents are. It could be one of them could be Talzin, and then finally, just magically, symbolically, they are spawned from the magic of the Night Sisters and Mother Talzin. So they're connected in so many ways, and I'm sure they're going to continue to play off these connections as the issues continue in this.
Yeah, that's great points you brought up. And also, in this comic book, we see Grievous kind of regain his menacing, intimidating nature that he had initially, like during the micro series.
Yes.
I say that Grievous is kind of like the Starscream of Star Wars. He's like, he's kind of known for running away and stuff. Even though I like him because a lot of people, when they bash the prequels, they'll be like, oh, well, Grievous, they'll say he's basically made just to sell toys and stuff, and that he's like a coward and whatnot. But it's good to have different types of villains. I don't want to use like a really tired cliche like saying, but Grievous, like not every single villain could be a badass. Like you have to have different kinds of villains, because if every single villain was like all powerful, omniscient being like Sidious, that would get kind of old. So it's good to have different kinds of villains. You got your Sidious type of villains, and Maul, who kind of falls in the middle, and like he's vulnerable but he's still very powerful. And then you have Grievous, who, and also if you take into the fact that Grievous, I mean, he's not force sensitive. He's basically, and he's going up against, the strongest, toughest, most skilled duelist fighters in this, universe. So you have to give him a
Mm.
little bit of slack. But anyway, Grievous, he just like in the I can't remember the name of the episode, the Clone Wars episode, but the one when he was on Dathomir and he killed all the
I
knights.
think that was Massacre, if I
Yeah,
remember correctly.
that's
Yes.
how could I forget that? That's a pretty fitting title for that. But yeah, when I saw that, I was like, yes, like Grievous is like a threat again, and
Right.
something about these Mother Talzin Dathomir related storylines just brings out the best in Grievous. Like, because he killed. Let me just show the picture quick. I know that the female Mandalorian is Cass, but I forgot the male's name. But he killed the guy. He's like, "Why don't you fight me face to face?" And
Yeah.
then he's like, "Sure," and then he impales him.
Yeah.
So that was nasty but pretty cool. And Maul and Grievous duke it out for a little bit, and then Maul retreats. Finally, someone runs away from Grievous. Grievous is
Yeah.
the one running away, and I wonder, just how severe the casualties were. Like we're told that it was pretty bad, but I wonder like roughly how much of the super commandos, the Shadow Collective was killed in this battle. Um, I guess we'll find out next
Yeah.
issue. But yes, so that's pretty much it. Next issue we're gonna see Dooku fighting some Night Brothers. I guess he's gonna be investigating, and that's how we're gonna learn some more backstory about the relationship between him and Talzin and Sidious and Talzin. But anything else you want to say about this, Chris?
Yeah, no, this was a very great comic. I mean, again, it was interesting reading a story that had Clone Wars pacing chopped up into parts like this, where you feel like this would only have been like maybe half an episode if it was on TV. So it's interesting just seeing the pacing of it and how different it is for comics. Because I mean, I've read some comics, but not like I'm not a huge comic book reader, so it's interesting just seeing how the pacing is different in the comic book adaptation versus the TV show. But I mean, it definitely leaves you wanting more, and the story is really interesting. And of course, it's hard not to imagine, like, what would this be like if I was actually seeing it on screen? But you have to kind of take it for what it is,
Yeah.
and it's awesome that we're seeing it at all, and it's not just a script on the shelf along with all those other amazing Star Wars projects we have not yet to see.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think a great job was done by the writers. Jeremy Barlow, great job adapting the script to comic book form, and then all the artists that I mentioned. I really liked seeing the different environments and characters and kind of a style that's a little bit different, obviously, than the CGI. And kind of reminds me a little bit more of the micro series and seeing it in that type of animation. So I definitely am going to be getting the next issue, and I really do hope that this is not the only time that a future Clone Wars script is going to be adapted into something, because there are a lot of other ones that I'm really interested to be seeing, especially Ahsoka and Cad Bane, for sure.
Yeah, Cad Bane, definitely. Ahsoka, I have a feeling we'll be seeing her in Rebels. I think there's a really strong chance. Hopefully we could see Cad Bane too, but I think he's a little less likely. But yeah, it would be great to see any Clone Wars storylines that were written and we didn't get in animated format in here, in a comic book. And just one last thing I wanted to point out, nothing too serious. I liked how just little tiny things like the commando droids and the super battle droid saying like, should we follow them? And they're like, negative, negative. Like that's definitely it was like it was funny, but it wasn't too campy. And I
Yeah.
liked how it captured like that's a very like Clone Wars type of
Yes.
thing. Like ever since the movie, like when when Ahsoka and Anakin are, on the ATTEs
Yeah.
climbing up, that mountain. Just little things like that.
Right.
With battle droids like that campy stuff, which I like. I think it's funny. So
Yeah.
I guess campy's not the best word to describe it. That's what people consider it. But yeah, I liked how little. I don't know what word I'm looking for. Not maybe idiosyncrasies. I'm not sure, but little things like
Right.
that just feel very Clone Wars they were thrown in there.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah.
So yeah. So thanks for coming on the show, Chris, and thanks for watching, everybody. And this has been the second episode of From a Certain Point of View. May the Force be with you. Okay.